As rare and untimely as they are, plane crashes are a terrifying situation to be in. It's bad enough to find yourself on a falling aircraft plummeting towards the earth. But what happens when two aircraft collide mid-air? That, sadly, is exactly what happened to Saudi Arabia Flight 763 and Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 on the 12th of November 1996 over the Indian city of Charkhi Dadri. This horrific accident is still, to this day, the deadliest mid-air collision in aviation history, and today we will be examining the situation. What caused this dreadful accident? What became of the individuals on board? And what happened in the investigation that followed? Join us in today's video as we explore the terrifying reality of the 1996 Charkhi Dadri mid-air collision. The two planes involved in the incident were Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 and Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907. The former was a Boeing 747-168B and was due to depart from the Indian city of Delhi, destined for a stop at Dhahran Air Base in Saudi Arabia, before continuing on to its final destination at King Abdulaziz International Airport in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. 312 people were present on board this flight, the majority of them Indian labourers who were travelling to work in Saudi Arabia. Citizens from the USA, Nepal, Pakistan, the UK and Saudi Arabia were also on board. The plane was captained by Khalid al-Shubaili and his first officer Nazir Khan. Al-Shubaili was a skilled and experienced pilot, having spent almost 10,000 hours in the air at the time of the accident. Alongside them was flight engineer Ahmed Edris, as well as several members of the cabin crew. Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 was an Aviation 276TD aircraft, travelling on a charter service from Kazakhstan's Shymkent International Airport. Its destination was Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi, India, the very same site Saudi Arabia Airlines Flight 763 was departing from. This was a much smaller flight than the former, with only 37 people on board at the time of the incident. 27 of these passengers, mostly composed of Russian Kyrgyz citizens who were on their way to go shopping in India on a trip funded by an organisation in Kyrgyzstan. The plane was captained by Alexander Robertovich Sherepanov and his first officer Ermek Kozametovich. They were also accompanied by flight engineer Alexander Alexandrovich Shuprov, a navigator Zahanbek Dusevenich Arapiev, and a radio operator Igor Alexeyevich Rep. Captain Sherepanov, much like Al-Shubaili on the other flight, was a very experienced pilot, with just over 9,000 hours in the air to his name. On the morning of November 12, 1996, Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 departed on time, 18:32 local Delhi time, and took to the skies without incident. Air traffic controller VK Dutta at Indira Gandhi International Airport cleared the flight to ascend to 10,000 feet just after takeoff, and soon the plane was well on its way. Dutta was, however, also managing the second plane involved in the incident, which was approaching Delhi from the north just as the Saudi Arabia flight was ascending. Just after the Saudi flight had taken off, Dutta permitted the Kazakh flight to descend to 15,000 feet, and then contacted the Saudi flight once more to clear them to reach 14,000 feet. Both planes were travelling in opposite directions, but were on the same airway, and by 1838 they were both maintaining a height of 14,000 feet. At this point, First Officer Nazir Khan of Saudi Arabian Airlines Flight 763 contacted VK Dutta, requested a higher level of elevation but this was refused. The flight was told to maintain their altitude, and Khan was received at Dutta's end, saying that they would continue to travel at 14,000 feet until further notice. At this point, neither plane could have known what would be coming next. A minute later, at 18:39 p.m, VK Dutta heard from the Kazakh crew as they reported they had reached their permitted altitude of 15,000 feet. But this was dangerously inaccurate. In reality, Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 was travelling at just over 16,000 feet and was still descending quickly. Dutta, at this point, informed the Kazakh crew that the Saudi crew would soon be approaching their 12 o'clock position and asked them to report back if they saw them. The Kazakh crew's radio operator, Igor Alexeyevich Rab, asked for clarification, and Dutta informed him that the Saudi flight was maintaining their altitude of 14,000 feet. This was the last that was heard from either flight before disaster struck. At 18:40, Dutta received another report, but this was not from either the Saudi or Kazakh aircraft crews. A passing United States Air Force cargo craft contacted air traffic control to report what they believed was a massive explosion in the sky at their 2 o'clock position, something that was immediately taken seriously. Dutta frantically tried to contact the Kazakh and Saudi flight crews to request updates, but nothing was returned from either craft. Fearing the absolute worst, Dutta escalated the incident. But what had happened up in the air that he couldn't physically see taking place? Just after Dutta's final radio call with the Kazakh flight crew, Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 continued to descend, erroneously believing they were travelling at a lower altitude than they were. While the Saudi crew were maintaining their altitude of 14,000 feet, the Kazakh crew descended quickly from around 16,000 feet, meaning that, though neither aircraft nor air traffic control knew it, they were on a direct collision course as one plane descended upon the other at 14,000 feet. By the time the crew spotted each other, it would have been far too late to change course, as the left wing of the Ilyushin slammed into the left wing of the Boeing. This caused the Boeing's wing to be sliced clean off, which, as the two planes scraped against one another, resulted in the severing of the Ilyushin's vertical stabilizers on the craft's tail. Following the collision, the Saudi crew immediately lost control of their Boeing, resulting in a widespread panic amidst the 300 plus people on board. The crew attempted to regain control, but without their left wing, they were doomed. The Boeing started to quickly lose altitude, heading nose first into a descending spiral, a trail of fire and smoke billowing from the damage left by the missing wing. Air pressure and damage to the craft caused the plane to break up in mid-air, and soon the crew found themselves hurtling towards the earth at 705 miles per hour, just over 60 miles per hour away from supersonic speed. As they slammed into the earth, every single person on board, 289 passengers, along with 23 crew, were killed. The subsequent investigation revealed the final thoughts of the crew as they uttered the Islamic Astaghfar forgiveness prayer to one another and recited the Shahada, an Islamic oath reiterating their loyalty to God. The plane hit the ground near Tadani village in the Bhiwani district of Haryana, India. While the Boeing hurtled to the ground, the Kazakh flight crew found themselves in a similar situation. The Ilyushin's left wing had sustained significant damage, and their stabilizers were completely severed. Almost immediately after the impact, the plane had gone into a flat spin, corkscrewing towards the ground at extreme speeds, before colliding in a field near Beroha village, Rohtak district, Haryana. All 37 people on board were killed, 27 passengers and 10 crew members. Following the collision, an investigation was headed by Delhi's High Court Judge Ramesh Chandra Lahoti. Wreckage was analysed, Flight data recorders were investigated, and Dutta was interviewed in what would be a thorough and meticulous inquiry. After gathering and analysing the information before them, Lahoti and his team came to the conclusion that the fault laid with the Kazakhstan Airlines Flight 1907 crew, who either misunderstood or failed to follow Dutta's instructions. Other factors were taken into account, including the fact that turbulence caused by clouds was particularly heavy on the day of the crash, and there were some communication issues with air traffic control. Lahoti found that the Kazakh crew had descended too far, too early, continuing to descend when they thought they were at 15,000 feet. His report also pointed the blame at the poor English language skills of the Kazakh pilots, relying entirely upon their radio operator to garner vital information from Dutta. It was suggested that Dutta's final call to the Kazakh crew, through no fault of his own, may have been misunderstood due to this language barrier. Moreover, air controllers from Indira Gandhi International Airport had stated that Kazakh crews rarely measured altitude in feet, which resulted in frequent confusion. Igor Alexeyevich Rep, the radio operator for Flight 1907, did not have his altimeter and needed to read over his shoulder at Captain Sharapanov's, which would have impacted his ability to accurately feed back to Dutta. Kazakh officials rejected Lahoti's findings, arguing that they did indeed have their pilots up to standard with English language. They claimed instead that the collision must have happened when Flight 1907 hit heavy turbulence when entering a large stretch of cumulus clouds. This was in turn disproven when meteorological reports from that day, along with investigative analysis and statements from other aircraft crew who witnessed the collision, showed that this was not the case. The points in the flight data where the Kazakh officials were claiming turbulence caused the crash showed different information on their records. The altimeters and recording equipment on board the Aviation were faulty. It was only when the Saudi crew was spotted did the Kazakh crew attempt to change course, which proved to be too late. Several new policies were brought into use around Delhi's airspace following this horrific incident. Air corridors were designated so that arrivals and departures would not run the risk of collision, and a secondary air traffic control radar became mandatory to accurately record altitude data. Any aircraft operating within Indian airspace would now be equipped with compulsory collision avoidance equipment, and efforts were made to reduce the airspace that was, at the time, under the control of the Indian Air Force, so commercial flights would have more space to operate. Efforts are currently underway to get a memorial set up for those who lost their lives in the Charkhi Dadri crash, but due to governmental red tape, this is proving difficult. The memorial would sit in a newly constructed park in the area and would contain names, pictures, and information on those who tragically died that day. The district administration is currently awaiting approval from the Haryana government and support from the Ministry of Civil Aviation of India, Airport Authority of India, the Saudi Arabian Embassy, and the Kazakhstan Embassy must be acquired before a decision can be made. Hopefully this will soon work out, and a monument can stand to the lives that were lost on those planes back in 1996. Consider that this is the worst mid-air collision in aviation history. It only makes sense for a memorial to be set up. So, that was a rundown of the tragedy of the 1996 Charkhi Dadri mid-air collision, one of the most terrifying and unfortunate aviation accidents of all time. As always, our thoughts are with the families of those who were, and still continue to be affected by, the loss brought about by this terrible incident, and we hope that a positive decision can be reached on the construction of the memorial monument soon.